I look at his project with content, I decided like, hey, you know what? I've been postponing an idea that I had that is like, why don't we create a little bit of good field content about uh, us as humans? I think that is important. And right now, everybody's talking about AI this and AI can do everything. AI is going to replace us. And you know what? If you're not in AI and things like that, you're out of the game and all of that. And it's like, hey, you know what? We need to remember that we matter, that
Yeah.
nothing about AI happens unless humans are involved. So when I saw your project, Chris, I was like, holy crap. Chris actually got me, and we never talk about this. We never share any ideas or
Mm.
anything like that. And I wanted to thank you because your project actually pushed me to get something that I was stuck for probably 4 or 5 months. It's like, okay, this is time to do it. So this is our celebratory first episode.
Hey, awesome. Well, thank you. I'm glad to be a part of it, and I'm glad that I had a little role in making it get kickstarted.
Cool. Okay. So, to give a little bit of background on how Chris and I know each other, we used to work together. More importantly, I've always been super impressed with Chris's creative nature. And actually, I've been one of the first. I've been supporting Chris's work for quite a bit of time.
Yeah,
This is
that's a
one
deep
of the
cut. Yeah.
yeah. And just so you know a little bit about of the time that we meet, I have an actual autographed version of this book
Look at that.
where we're starting to talk about promoting in social media. So this tells you how much time we've been together, how much blood, sweat, and tears we've put into digital marketing. And well, here we are, a
Here we
few
are. Yeah.
decades later, and a few more gray hairs and less hair in total. But here we are.
Maybe a few pounds more. Yes, but yes, I agree. Yeah,
Yep.
it's been a wild, crazy ride.
Cool. Okay, so Chris, tell me, can you share a little bit of why content? How did tell us what content is all about,
Yeah.
and then how you get to this idea?
Yeah. So Quantent is it's a website. It's a digital experience where it was intended to look like a pretty convincing B2B technology company that looks it's intended to look like a real company that sells AI content marketing services to businesses. And the idea here was that what I wanted to do is kind of create a creative calling card for the work that I was looking for. I'm looking for full time work, but also fractional content director and content creation work presently. And I thought, well, there's a lot of folks in who are looking for work right now who have the same skill set as I do, but what do I have that kind of stands out? And you mentioned this kind of creative bent that I have, that I've always had. And I had a side career for some time as as a transmedia or cross media storyteller. I was working as a novelist, and the novels that one of the novels that I helped write was you bought the book, but the book came with like physical objects like a driver's license or a birth certificate or a family photo, and things inside those artifacts that came with the book and clues inside the book propelled you into a narrative that unfolded exclusively online and via telephone, right? And so this was,
Mm.
and I had some experience doing viral B2C marketing campaigns that were also like very experimental and merging a bunch of media and a bunch of digital experiences into kind of like a cohesive narrative. And I have used that to good effect in my B2B content marketing career, as I've helped create or oversaw the creation of some B2B marketing campaigns over the past few years. And I thought, well, that's a pretty good differentiator. I have a Swiss Army knife of skills. I know how to interweave these different storytelling media, such as anything from infographics to copy and text to video and some rudimentary graphic design, and a lot of AI savvy, savvy with ChatGPT and Claude and Sora and Midjourney. Let's see what we can do with all of these different kind of ingredients and experiences, and try to create a cohesive narrative that was a persuasively realistic B2B SaaS company's website that totally made fun of B2B marketing, totally made fun of technology marketing, totally made fun of AI hype, totally made fun of content marketing, but also because of this kind of interactive or immersive component that I like to bring to campaigns in my own personal work, that there was a little puzzle or a little mystery to solve there on the site as well. That would, if you notice the clues and you engaged in the experience a bit, you could unlock a quote secret part of the website. And if you think that, or at least this is my biased take, that if you thought that like the public facing part of the website was funny, it really goes unhinged and gets really absurd once you cross that threshold into the quote secret part of the website.
Yeah, actually, that was pretty cool. And the reason why I'm sharing right now the 800 number is, if you're in the US, you must call this number. The that Yeah, the fun thing is, when I look at this website, I see like this is a really well put landing page or website for in some cases. But when I was reading it the first time, I was like, wow, work agency is gone.
Yeah.
Like AI is taking over. I was like, this was so impressive. And the funny thing is, I've been looking at different companies that say like, oh, we went fully AI. You don't need AI. You don't need humans anymore. You just get into your phone, upload, use AI to create a brief, and then magic happens. Like, okay, so this is weird because I know you. And like, how Chris get into this?
Yeah.
Now, for the folks out there, do you mind explaining kind of a one kind of what is transmedia 101?
Yeah, sure. So transmedia is it's a word that has different meanings depending on kind of like what industry you're in. For instance, if we were like in talking about entertainment, like films and TV and comic books, transmedia within that space is like a narrative that can be told over different channels or different media. So a comic book spin-off of a television show that is inspired by a novel that and it's all like Star Wars, right, where you have a narrative that's unfolding, a cohesive narrative that's unfolding over different media. um in When I was creating this kind of content regularly, several years ago, transmedia was also kind of meant to describe like a narrative that may not span a story over many different media channels that were monetized, but essentially a story that could be experienced by an end user by engaging with different media to further immerse them into the story that they were experiencing. This is an instance with content where you visit the website and you're clearly being engaged and immersed into a what looks like a B2B marketing or B2B website experience. You tap the video, tap play on the first video, and it looks like it's going to be a conventional experience, but then something changes, right? That sparks you to kind of lean in a little bit, and then it switches out. That's a deft use of video to suggest that there's something more happening at the website than you might think. The very clear call to action to call the phone number, for instance, that's a real working number that I bought, and you call that number and it appears to be a perfectly normal customer service line, but then within a few seconds that changes, and you are provided with information to then explore the website in a new way. But in every turn, the idea here with what I would call, what I like to call transmedia, is that the story is using these different ways that we communicate and these different ways that we consume information to hook you and drag you a little bit further down a rabbit hole or a narrative rabbit hole, from a passive consumer to what I would call like an active participant, where you are suddenly excavating a mystery, in this case excavating a mystery or solving a mystery that you had no idea that you were going to experience when you first visited the website. And I've been told that while the mystery that one needs to be solved for content is very simple, and that was by design, that folks did feel a bit emotionally or intellectually invested the further down the rabbit hole they went.
Got it. Okay, so In short, basically, because we in marketing we talk a lot about a 360 campaign, and basically that means your website, social media, paid ads,
Mhm.
email. But basically, you're taking it. This is not about a 360; it's more of a full-on experience, rather than just trying to get to different. Of course, you're getting to different media channels, but you're getting it as part of the experience, not as part of exposure. To put it that way.
I would agree with that. And I used this to great effect when I was working at a company called Six Sense a few years ago. We had a competitor takeout campaign that we wanted to launch, and the mandate was very simple. It was just like, we just need to take market share away from the bad guys, a competitor. Great, but how do we? And when you're when you're presented with that mandate, there is only one real way to do it, and that's the boring way, which is to say that we're better than the bad guys, right? And maybe we present some proof points, and maybe we don't. But I very quickly kind of like grokked onto this idea of, well, how could we position this boring story in a way that's very interesting and immersive. The photograph within the picture frame might be the same, but the picture frame will now have Christmas lights on it, or something kind of dazzling that shatters the sameness of B2B marketing and a traditional B2B campaign, and instead becomes like a beacon for people who are looking for something different, but then something that I believe, and I believe this very sincerely, that feels a bit B2C, that feels that that evokes a genuine emotion, as opposed to just simply being presented with a rational argument for why one technology solution is better than another. So I presented this to our team, and they dove in, and they were very happy to do this. Where we created a fake website for a relationship counseling hotline. We want you to break up with your data vendor and date us instead. And if you need some help getting through this trying time, call this 800 number, and you can speak to a counselor, which is actually a BDR, that would do like a quick discovery call with you. And if you press two, you'd have a guided meditation experience that would tell you how why you were better than what you were getting, and why you needed to dump your vendor. And if you pressed three, you'd listen to a pep talk from a Morgan Freeman sound alike. It just went on and on and on. We recorded. We even did some of it in Spanish, because you can't not press six and not have you have to have a Spanish option, because every hotline today has a Spanish option, right?
Spanish.
Yeah. So and so we recorded about 20 minutes of audio for this, and and very affordably. And then we created a website that supported this breakup concept, and this hotline concept that included, I don't know, like personality quizzes to see if your vendor was being abusive, or was a lousy a lousy vendor. A 90s themed infomercial that had lots of pop cultural references for people who were around during that time. And it was really designed, not only to be engaging and funny, and we got so much engagement on LinkedIn, especially from this, but by design, we knew, and by we, I mean me, this was kind of, I intuited this, was that if we are chasing folks, decision makers who are, control the purse strings and the decision making for which, data provider vendor they're going to have, they're probably of a certain age, right?
Yep.
And the people of that age are that a 90s nostalgia bomb will just be catnip for them. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. We had folks, middle management and above, who were just crowing about it. So and that's an instance where at every kind of turn in the online experience, and in the telephonic experience, right, we were deftly using these different channels to bring you a bit deeper into that fictional world, including like a custom mixtape, which was essentially a Spotify playlist that you could, play in the background as you broke up with your data vendor. We even went so far as, the success of the campaign was so great that we launched it in January. We started inching towards Valentine's Day, and there was still a lot of engagement for the campaign. So we created like a
Wow.
Valentine's Day themed, expansion of the campaign with, I don't know, printable Valentine Day cards and stuff. So, and at every turn, again, you're just inviting them to go a little bit deeper, and enjoy that experience and that fictional world, if you will, a little bit. And you're giving them permission to play and to feel things that they're not supposed to feel during business hours, like joy.
Like fun.
Fun, right? Exactly.
No, so let me ask you a question, because I personally feel that uh, right now marketers are a little bit hesitant about being creative.
Mhm.
That they are constrained by many reasons, and they're pushed sometimes because of society, maybe because they're not willing to put their neck on the chopping board in case something goes wrong. And I think that this is not only a B2B problem, but also a B2C problem. I think that in terms of B2C, you're always looking at the most creative thing is just a character that acts a little bit funny or dumb or things like that. But in
Yeah.
reality, there is not a lot of creativity. How, what will be your advice to marketers out there that are trying to get their creative or push their agencies to be more creative without, and basically being able to convince the board, to convince the people that are making decisions and signing and paying the checks?
Yeah, great question. For me, and I'll describe my experience at Six Sense. The VP of growth there, this dynamite dude named Adam Kaiser, who's still with the business. He was my supervisor, and I had generated a lot of goodwill just through sheer virtue of not ultra creative content, 2 or 2.5 years of ultra creative content creating for Six Sense, but being a reliable workhorse of creating content that generated meaningful pipeline and business results. And that nearly all of that was traditional B2B, content marketing, right? Blog posts or whatever, ebooks or meh, meh, meh. And there came a point where I saw an opportunity, like where that relationship had warmed, where there was a very firm bedrock of trust. Right. And there was an opportunity to do this competitive takeout campaign that was, the stakes were so low when you think about it. Like we just launched a data, like a data sales solution or contact data solution. We're trying to peel, customers away from the 8 million pound gorilla of the industry. They're not even going to feel it if we steal away some customers. That's how big they are. But so there's
Yep.
nothing but upside. But like there was no budget for this thing. There was no time for this thing. There was no anticipated workload for this thing. And I just kind of like thought to myself, if we are able to manage costs in a way that and present this narrative in a way, or this business proposition in a way, dump your data vendor, in a way that was cheap and yet memorable, and to me memorable is creative. Like maybe I can sell my boss on this idea, especially if it was cheap. And I have a career as an independent, creator of podcast content and video content and all this stuff from this parallel world of, an indie artist for some time. And I knew that like I mitigated costs by making it not a video experience, but a telephone experience, because like it's really cheap to write a script and it's really cheap to hire a voiceover artist. Like that is dirt cheap, right? How could we like the yes, exactly, this infomercial that you see here, a great deal of it is stock footage, right? The original photography that you see here, by this actor, the set was deliberately lo-fi. Everything was deliberately standard definition, if you know what I mean. Was
Yep.
And the website was also not sophisticated from a design point of view, and that was also by design. I know, like it's hard to believe, but like the net new cost to create this immersive experience was 12 grand. That was it, right? And that was
That's it.
basically that. Yes, and that was basically to film, to do the filming and the maybe some editing. The rest of it was, all the cost was absorbed either in house, and that was just part of our job, or we had an existing relationship with a design vendor, and we had already spent the money on the credits to create whatever creative we needed them to create. So we were only out of pocket 12 grand. And that was also for the phone line and stuff. And we generated was it in 60 days, like 1.5 million in pipeline? That's bananas. Right. And again,
It's a huge return investment.
yeah, I would agree. Right.
Huge
And
return on non-investment.
right. And it's not, and I'm not saying that to brag because like but it's just, I think that it reveals the potential, especially in a conservative space like B2B marketing, where, just anything different, but especially anything different and memorable. Look at that. Even like that from and the fine
That
print
reminds
is
me of all
funny.
the attorney TV ads and things like that.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
it
And
is.
like, and anyway, so that was, my, that was the great big plan. So I promise all of this is going back to answer your question. How would my peers or my colleagues, pursue this? I imagine that you would need to have a firm foundation of trust with your boss, or the gatekeepers. I would do it on a project, at least at first, that is very low stakes, right? And that, especially leaning into solutions that are very affordable to mitigate cost, because businesses associate cost with risk, right? and
Yes.
and and so, and I think that is a part of the risk that you're describing, is that, marketing is often, perceived as a drain, not a fountain, right? It's a cost center. It's not a, it's not a revenue generator. And that's absolutely false. Like, that is absolutely not true. It's that way when businesses become, I want to say, like, ultra committed to traditional tactics and traditional strategies, and aren't interested in breaking out of that mold. But by the very virtue of breaking out of the mold, you find yourself, generating 1.5 million in pipe on a 12 grand investment, just by the virtue of being different and clever and memorable.
That's a really good point, because most of the time, and again, my as you know, my background is SEO, and we're always measured by number of impressions, number of
Exactly.
clicks, position, and all of that. And at the end of the day, at least what I try to tell our clients is, we need all of this needs to show up on a spreadsheet where we know how much revenue we're at. Now, this is and I'm gonna share a little bit of what I see right now, because with the shift from SEO to AIO, so from search engine optimization to AI optimization, or whatever name you want to put into it, branding became a huge component. And this is a total obscure side of SEO that many SEO people will have no idea that existed.
Yeah.
Why? Because the whole game was like, hey, let me see who's in front of us. Let me do something a little bit better, and now I can rank higher. But we never, basically, many SEOs never pay attention to branding. So the fact that you're bringing a different concept, or a way to differentiate your brand by using a creative concept, that is going to be huge in terms of AIO.
That's
That's a
really
little bit of
interesting. Yeah, and I hadn't thought of it that way, but you're right. I mean, and not to suggest that content marketing as we've done it for the last 15 years is dead. It isn't. Or broken. It isn't. But it kind of is, and it kind of is. And it's been kind of dead and kind of broken for a while, because it's become mostly a generator of organic traffic, and not really something that's impactful or interesting, right? A lot of B2B content on company websites is mostly there to generate organic search and traffic, and is less concerned about relevance, right? Think about this for a minute. And we've both been around the block as professionals. We've both, managed teams, and we've both, examined, software solutions, for instance, to help solve problems for our businesses or our teams. And someone at our level, a buyer is what I would call us, who's been in the business for 10 years or more, does some keyword research and visits a blog, that has a headline that purports to solve our problems. And like, the first thing it explains is like, what is account-based marketing? I know
it's
it's
been for 10
insulting.
years.
Yes, exactly. It's insulting, and it's alienating. And
the,
if you're a buyer, like, that's your experience, right? That's your content
the,
marketing consumption experience.
I remember we were working together, that you used to train the team, your team, well, our team, saying like, you need to respect the audience
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And
And their
I love
intelligence.
that, and
Yeah.
I've been using it constantly.
Yeah, and there's like, there's some like craft stuff that, accompanies that from a content, like creation perspective. Like, look, you don't need to spend 3 paragraphs setting the scene, just get to the, like, just get to the point, and that's kind of a part of
Yeah.
it. But also it's, you don't need to set the scene because they already know all that. Like, just get to the value, just get to, like, yes, if you need to explain a problem, make sure that it's a new problem that they're not aware of, and then just go right into, solutions and value. You don't need to waste their time. And by creating, content that is revelatory and actually has prescriptive value, that uh, leans less into the SEO game, or the commoditized version of the SEO game, but it also, plays into the more valuable, as you were describing, brand game, in that I, as a buyer, visit this blog post, and I am actually educated and go, huh. All you need is one huh in a blog post. If I can just get you to go huh once, you're going to remember that blog post. You may not even remember what you hud about, but you'll remember
That's
the
true.
post and you'll remember the brand. And so, kind of like transplanting that into on a larger campaign or a larger content strategy, point of view, that brand, like, I'm really a big fan of branding and brand awareness, right? And that's, kind of bringing it to the AI SEO, question that you were kind of presenting, is that if we have spent the last 20 years basically shoveling coal into a furnace, into an SEO furnace, that means nothing anymore, because all of our content has become fact, a matter of fact, and is no longer distinguished or from anyone else's, competitors' content. What, and the AI just ignores all of that source material, right? And only links to the stuff that's actually interesting. Well, you bet your ass we should be writing things that are interesting and creating experiences that are interesting. It's the only way to stand out, I believe.
It's interesting because one of the conversations that I have is, and I wrote a blog post about this, and is the stereotypical SEO agency that creates content for clients. My personal opinion is that it's gone.
Yeah.
That model, it's gone, because as a brand, you are the one that knows what's going on. You're the expert,
Yeah.
and you can have the best SEO agency out there. They don't have your knowledge, your expertise, and your day to day to do that for you.
Yeah, and it's kind of heartbreak, and the leaning so heavily into SEO, what I'll call, as commoditized SEO, has always been pretty heartbreaking for me, because that is less about art and craft and more about, for lack of a better phrase, at least now, checking boxes, and building little widgets that, that game the algorithm, right? And my hope is, and now we're at a point where, like, content creators are going to be writing content that will never be that's never going to be read by a person, Blas. Like, it's all going to be consumed by AI. And so in a world where most of the content that a business produces will never be consumed by a human, where do you dedicate your resources so that you ensure that the true revelation and the true creativity is hitting human eyes? And again, and that is not, a grocery list of SEO words being smashed into a pillar page. That is true, truly artfully crafted, content, be it blog posts or campaign landing pages.
Absolutely. So it's interesting. You mentioned the craft part, and I want to go back to the reason but I wanted to bring you on this is, as far as I know, you actually started with audiobooks decades ago.
Yeah.
uh, you also you are into, let's say, film, or at least you have concepts of graphic design,
Mhm.
video production, and things like that. And one of kind of the purpose of kind of making this first episode is, can one person replace a whole agency with the use of AI?
Yeah. What do you think?
My well, I do have an opinion, of course.
Yeah.
Uh, the way I say it is, if you have the right person.
Right. I would agree with that.
And what I mean by that is, and I think that you're you're basically the result of this. Your whole background, your whole professional history, your whole
Yeah.
career is the one that allows you to, hey, AI, this is how you are creative. This is how I want this shot to be taken. I want to
Yeah.
have this proposition. I want to have this, and that. And that's how you get the army of AIs to do what you want.
That makes sense. Yeah. I have a really, I used to think that this was a bad thing, but the older and more experienced I become, the more joyful I am. I have a really weird career, right? Where, I was a journalist because I wanted to write movies and books, novels when I was a kid, but like I knew that I eventually realized that wouldn't make money. So I went to be a journalist. And in journalism school, I was exposed to photography and photo editing and graphic design that kind of scratched those creative components of me that I kind of always thought I'd had. And then, pursued, through journalism and then, some freelance work, building this Swiss Army knife of skills that weren't just, what channels to tell stories in, but like how to best tell stories in those channels. And what I mean by that is that, like a 1,000 word blog post can deeply dive into a particular subject and leave you breathless with the knowledge that you've acquired, but it cannot beat the instant arresting emotion that you'll have when you see a photograph. Right. So and the photograph can't compare to the moving image of a video in other particular instances. Right. And it's knowing or intuiting, because I've never had any formal training in any of this yet, is that intuiting what makes the best story to tell in these particular, these different channels, be they audio or visual, still image versus moving image, and intuiting that, and then leaning into them in ways that, when you kind of look at the story that you're trying to tell overall, well, this particular part of the story should probably best be told in video, and it requires some media fluency, but it also requires humility. And what I mean by that is, there's a part of, like, for instance, there's a part of content where you, as the end user, if you follow the rabbit hole and go down the mystery, you find yourself in a secret part of the website where this big plot twist is kind of revealed about, the ambitions of the business. What there I am, like a prisoner of war. Thank you,
That's what
Mid
happens.
Journey.
But that's what happens when you go deep into the story of Quentin.
That's right. Contained, because I was, because the fictional version of me is imprisoned, in this
Yep.
particular story. Um, but there was a point. There was a point where I needed to economically explain like why the bad guys were doing what they were doing. And I knew that I couldn't do it with words. It would just take too long. And so I tried like an infographic, and that didn't work. And I realized what I need is a video. There is just something about like a 2-minute video that can make this content easier to consume and more impactful and memorable to consume because of the particular channel that I'm using, especially if it's funny, which it was. And I'll use that instead. And that was like an 11th hour addition to, the Quantum experience, because I realized that just words weren't enough. But it's knowing that words weren't enough, or that words would take too long. It's having that kind of experience and that savvy that also is a part of that Swiss Army knife, or that one person agency that concept that you're describing. I used AI throughout all of this, including writing copy for the website, but I couldn't but like the AI had to know that the content was intended to be presented ironically, because again, we're making fun of this stuff. We want to make sure that the copy makes fun of it. But it was like, not only did I have to tell it, the concept of, the B2B company that's using content marketing powered by AI, blah, 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 but then train it on the idea of, and you need to present this ironically, and then training it on a voice, a literal brand voice that could convey not only, the straight laced, B2B content marketing voice that every dumb business has, but also this kind of subversive something, something else is happening here. Something's a little nefarious here. There's, like the writer of this website is smug and a little judgmental of humans, or whatever it might be. And it took a
Yeah.
little, it didn't take it took a non-trivial amount of time to get there. But once I trained it, that on that, because I knew what I wanted in my mind, then it all started kind of coming together in terms of, like, for instance, a copy generation point of view. So I think that having fluency and having a vision, a pretty clear vision, early on, not from the beginning, but excavating it pretty quickly is probably pretty important.
So let me ask you another question. So many creatives and basically marketing groups and everything, they all work out of briefs.
Yeah.
Um, how do you think a brief will look like? And I don't know if you have something like that for content. Like, how do you? One is because right now your creative team becomes you
Yeah.
and a bunch of different AIs. So basically, the way I'm saying it is you become your own product manager, project lead.
Yeah.
You're the one with the whole concept and everything else. And but then you also have to be self-critical of the quality that you're
Yeah.
getting. And I'm also assuming, well, I've been using AI for quite a bit as well, and I'm also something that I've seen is that you actually physically get tired because you there are things that probably like
Yeah.
I could do this in 1 second, but now I have to tell it how to do it, and now we need to fix this, change this, and I don't have a way to
Yeah.
modify everything that already comes in a box. So my f- coming back to my first question is, how do you think that someone we already covered that you have a lot of experience on this,
Yeah.
regardless if you had uh, education or just or basically life education. I will put it like university, uh, the University of Life. But let's say that we have that covered. How is that creative kind of process of
Yeah.
sitting down, identifying what you need, making sure that you hit the in both cases, in content and the one for your data vendor, how do you make sure that you don't get away from too much on the creative side that you actually miss the mark on the business side of things?
Yeah, dynamite. Great question. So, for me, I'll kind of start with content. Was what was I started with a business goal, or a narrative goal, or whatever you want to call it, and the goal was, I need to make. I've been unemployed for 10 months. I need to create something that is highly persuasive and highly memorable to end users, that, and essentially it was like, I want to create something that I can include in a resume, or that I can include in my portfolio, and that I can kind of, promote on LinkedIn a bit, that illustrates not just one skill set, but all of them, right? And not just the content creation skill set, but an experience that reflected content strategy, messaging, branding, look and feel, deft use of one channel over another, the whole kind of bag. And so I really quickly realized that, like, and I also it was really important for me to have this kind of interactive or immersive element to it, where it wasn't just a website, but there was an experience, right? Like, that was also really important to me, because I think that that's ultimately what makes content. If you follow the breadcrumbs, that's what makes content really funny, and really kind of clever and memorable. It's not, the 8 website pages that you kind of visit and see, wow, this is a really convincing and persuasive fake company website. It's the moment where, you call the number, and then you hack into the secret part of the website, and then shit just gets weird. Like, that's where, that's where the memories are, and that's where the truly, funny
Yeah.
stuff is. And so like, I very quickly kind of came onto the emotion of, like, okay, like, I want it to be all that in a bag of chips. I want it to kind of reveal, like, showcase all of those skills. Um, and then it became a question of, well, what kind of story do I want to tell? And so I considered my audience, right? And my audience was marketers, people hiring for, content, content director, or content creator, or content VP, who knows, a senior director, marketers who are hiring for those roles. that I was looking for. And then it became, well, if I leaned into my knowledge of, because I'm convinced that, like, at least there's a point in this career where you just like you just see the puppet strings of all of this of marketing, right?
Yes. Yes.
And it's like, and if someone is a VP or higher and they're looking to hire like a director or senior director, they know all of those puppet strings. They know all the buzzwords that are used. They know all the dumb bullshit, value proposition positioning. They know that, half of the terms on a technology website are going to be trademarked, and those trademark terms are going to be dumb and goofy. And, and there has to be some cheesy B2B corporate video that explains the solution. There's just like a whole kind of like spectrum of greatest hits things that, like, no matter where you would go to work in B2B marketing, these things would be on a website. And so, like, I realized, well, let's just make fun of all that. Let's call out all of those puppet strings, right? Because that is, showing not only, that's illustrating fluency, right? Like, industrial fluency. And then by making fun of it, it's not quite saying we are peers, because I don't want to, suggest that, but that you would be dealing with someone who's creatively savvy. Here's a perfect example, which cracks me up every time, is that, like, this is our meet the team, page on the content site. And instead of having photographs of executives, I thought to myself, well, what if all the executives were AI? And then it was like, well, how would you photograph them? And originally the idea was, well, I'll just have like Midjourney create some fake looking, robot people. And then I was like, no way. Like, as soon as I realized that, like, have pictures of servers, it was game over. Right. And the thing is that, like, if you are fluent in what an about our leaders page looks like, and you come here, like, that shit's funny. I mean, that's just plain old funny. Right.
And I love the titles, like, because everybody's like, oh, now how can we make AI feel more human? Like, really? Why don't you spend one more neuron and just do it yourself? There's some
Right.
stuff that I think that humans are still a lot better, and kind of emotions is one of those. Um, I was talking to someone, a musician. He was like, well, now AI can create music, and it's actually keeping all time signatures and things like that. And but you know what is missing? The human
Yeah.
imperfection.
Yeah, the heart.
If you're
Yeah.
doing a
Yeah.
vibrato on a string, and then you went up a little bit of a note too much, and that's what brings the passion, the everything to it.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of snaking back to, because I don't want to lose the thread on
Yep.
your question, but it was essentially like, where are my strengths as a storyteller and as a strategist? What is a story that I can present to my target market that would really kind of click and resonate with them? And so for me, it was like, let's just make this a big marketing in joke. And then it was like, well, wait a minute, like, AI is a super timely and relevant, topic, right? And especially AI in the content marketing space or the content creation space. My LinkedIn is just filled with writers and storytellers who are righteously and rightly terrified, right? And I'm just simply a little less terrified, because I'm savvy with AI, because I told myself to do it and I made myself do it so that I could remain relevant in a post AI world. So that was, once I kind of stumbled on that, and then, and I don't want to reveal the plot twist, but like, and then and then I realized that, the plot twist would make this particular timely topic funny and memorable. That's when I realized, okay, well, let's make it a website with this particular narrative. And then it became, and just like a brief, it was like, okay, well, what's my scope of work? How many pages of the website do I need to create? Well, we got to have an about our executive team page, because everyone has that, and we got to have this page, and we got to have that page, and we have to have one for this. And so, and wouldn't it be cool if we had an employee portal? What could I hide behind the employee portal? And then so I just kind of like, created, a grocery list of first pages that we had to create, or I had to create, then the copy that would accompany that, the assets like video or infographics. And again, at every turn, I just leaned into, what is the cheapest yet most effective way to do this, right? And by the end, like this took me 10 days, and it took me only a week to create the website and the copy and the images. It was the 4 days doing this monster sized video at the very end of the experience, kind of like the, the grand finale for the experience. That took me a really long time, because that was all done certainly by hand. And that was all me learning best practices of video editing and storytelling, and learning video, a new video software. But there was a scope of work, and there was an identification of different pieces of content and different channels to create. And then there was a budget, right? How long, what am I going to have to, well, shit, now I need to invest in Adobe stock. Oh crap, I need to invest in a sound effects library resource. Now I have to, and then like doing the research, or asking ChatGPT to do the research of finding like the most effective and most affordable solutions, right? Like just like finding cheap solutions, and exploiting free trials and all of that stuff. Like, that just like asking ChatGPT to do that research for me eliminated, I know, like 20 hours worth of effort, sifting through crappy Google results, etc. So I hope I'm answering your question in terms of, like, in many respects, it's not different than creating than if this were just like a fully team-based endeavor. The only difference is that I, as the project manager or the creative director, am then riding shotgun with the content creator, or in this case AI, and iteratively giving the AI creative feedback like I would a human, which I'm experienced at. So in that respect, even that feedback loop and that coaching, and that, let me share my vision, and no, it's not quite there, let me share it again. Even that skill set that I had came in really handy as I was, creating these assets. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. And I think that we're both aligned that yes, you can do a lot of the stuff with AI, but definitely needs a human, of course, but that human needs also to be prepared to do it. Because what I'm saying a lot is,
Yeah, I get it.
oh, prompt engineers are the future. Yeah, but still, a prompt engineer needs to know what they're talking about.
And this is, you need to know what good is. This is something that really kind of like, just as an aside, this is an existential fear that I have about AI. AI in the workforce. It's not stealing jobs, although I am concerned about that. It is that if a young professional leans on AI to do most of their writing, and that would be appropriate considering the era in which we live, they're less likely to put in the reps of writing dog shit copy and getting that copy beaten up by editors. And then you do it again, and you do it and again, and you do it again. And through doing it again and again and again, you learn what good looks like, right? You have taste, you have experience, you have conviction, you have a point of view. That muscle, it won't even atrophy. It won't exist, right, if we over rely on that stuff early, I think early in our careers. So in that respect, as threatened as I feel like I might be, my livelihood might be by AI, having the gray matter and taste and a point of view is actually the key the key differentiator, and what was able to make me realize that, with AI, yes, you can write a prompt, but like, understanding that first prompt won't get you what you want. It's not Google, right? You need to,
Mhm.
it's like a block of marble. You need to keep chipping away at it. And you have to kind of know what you are looking for, which requires taste and a vision and creative intent as you're kind of digging deeper. One more thing, and then I promise I'll shut up, is that, like, but also being open to what the AI brings in its creative output. Like, for instance, there's a chunk of the secret part of the website where there are Sora generated videos of a fictitious Chris Hutchins being bullied by the bad guys, right?
Yes.
And what I did was, is like, I deliberately included some details. Chris is chained to a desk, and Chris is typing on a computer, and there is a bad guy behind him, and the bad guy says something about blah, and that was it. Like, I didn't write the dialogue, right? I didn't, I didn't describe what the bad guy looked like. I didn't describe what Chris looked like. And I would say 9 out of 10 times the output was garbage, right? Or it was, the video wasn't synced with the audio. There's all kinds of creative, missteps that it does. But when it nailed it and I looked at it, I would notice that, like, well, that's a joke I never would have come up with. That is so funny, right? Or like that was, I told it to tell a joke, but like it didn't tell it the way I wanted it to. I would have told it, but it's still very funny. Let's keep it, right? So there's like this odd, serendipity, to the output of the content that you also have to be kind of open to and realize, recognize a good idea when you see it.
which is it's a huge a huge thing by itself because you need to one you're able to recognize that mainly because you actually have a background managing teams, managing people, so you actually get to know how to accept that someone can come over with a better idea than you. But when you work on it by yourself,
Yeah.
you're not used to it.
Yeah, and I think that, for me, and this may be my journalism background, not only as a writer, but then as an editor, right? Is that throughout that process of that creative and professional process, you learn to become a better, when you critique others' work. If you're lucky and you're mindful, you learn how to critique your own work and kind of get out of your creative mind to go into what I call the editor or editorial mind, right? To be more kind of deliberate about, or to level up what you're doing. In the instance of Quantent, I brought the experience as close to finished as I could, but I had but this component of interactivity and immersion, right, where there's an invitation to engage with the content in a way that you never do before, which is like you call the phone number and you go to the website and you do the this and the that, and there's a little puzzle to solve there. I wanted to make sure that that wasn't too difficult. So in this instance, while I believe that I nailed to a 90% or 95%, quality, the copy and the photo, the images and the video, I wasn't as confident about the user experience, right? And had playtesters. I had playtesters. I had like 30 people go through the experience and give me feedback on, like, was this little puzzle too hard to solve, right? And the answer was yes. And it wasn't hard to solve, but it took more time than I think a typical, website visitor who isn't trained to look at websites as rabbit holes into secret conspiracies. I mean, it's absolutely, completely fair. Like, how do we streamline that process? And through their feedback, I was able to streamline the process. And you were an important part of that, Blas. Your critique really kind of brought it to the finish line in terms of, like, well, how simple should I make it? And the answer was quite simple, but as long as I can get you to the end, and you're having a good time and you're laughing at the end, that's really what mattered most. It wasn't that you solved a puzzle to get there. It's that we got you there as quickly as we could.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting that you actually had a bigger, better process than many companies that I know of when they're actually publishing things that go to the public.
Oh, because
And
play
what I mean
testing.
by that is you actually play tested with many people, and many companies that I know of, they're like, "Oh, I feel that this works. Great, let's push it."
Yeah, and
Do
and
you
for
realize you have 30,000 people going to your website? Yes. I'm just gonna push it.
no, I
Okay.
know. And this, and why was I like that? Because of all of the, kind of like the skill sets that we've described that, I'm blessed to have had or to kind of like honed over my years, that game design component was the least developed. And so I don't have expert level in that. So I felt compelled and doubt, right? And this is appropriate. Like, it's good to have doubt. It's good to play test, and it's good to kind of stress test a creative idea or even like a user experience. And that's what motivated me to do it. If I'd thought that it was, if I had 10 more years of game design experience, I'd been like, oh yeah, they're going to be fine. But no, I really wanted to interrogate the user experience to make sure that it was, hitting what it needed to hit.
Okay. So one last question, and my idea is to show that you were able to pull this off because you have what it needs, what it takes. What would be the craziest edit or the craziest copy editing that you had to do to a B2B document?
What's the craziest edit that I've ever had to do?
to a B2B document?
What first comes to mind, and I know this is underwhelming, is that like making it snappier and making it better and with has more energy, right? Typically when you might think of like content that has gone off the rails and you need to edit it, right? That's never the case that I've had in my B2B kind of like creative leadership experiences, that it's always too safe, it's always too vanilla, it is always dull-eyed. And so like how do we bring some verve to it? How do we bring some memorability to it, even if it's just simply how do we make it easier to read? So instead of having three dense paragraphs, let's just make that a list of bullet points, right? And let's add a
Yeah.
subhead here just to give the eye a moment to blink and not be assaulted with a bunch of paragraph after paragraph of text. There's like different hints and little tricks that I've learned over the years that kind of help mitigate and bring some verve and speed to a piece of copy, for instance. But I wish I could give you a really memorable experience where just like this thing was unhinged and I had to rein it in. But no, like 9 times out of 10, it's me trying to pull it, rein it out and making the leash longer so that it can bring a little more personality or impact to the experience, to the reading experience.
So I remember having a conversation with you of like, if I try to write something that is 1,000 words, it takes me a whole day.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, I just wrote 10,000 words. And I'm like, okay, I know you're a word herder, but the most important part is that then you go like, now I have to edit.
Now I have to edit it. Yeah. And I bet
And
those 10,000 words became 1,000 after my edit. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Chris, how can people can get in touch with you? How do they know more about you, and how can they know more about content?
Yeah, thanks. And it's been a pleasure, Blas. Thank you. Our longtime friendship makes this so easy. But your great questions were it's just been a great experience and a wonderful opportunity. If folks are interested in connecting with me, they can do so on LinkedIn. They can look for JC Hutchins or Chris Hutchins. I usually come up with either search, but JC Hutchins is probably a better search. If you wanted to learn more about Quantent, you can go to quantent.io. That's QUANTENT.io. When you get there, be sure to read the homepage, but be sure to call the phone number because that gives you the keys to the rest of the experience.
Yeah, I've been keeping my mouth shut because yes, please go take a look at the website. You're gonna have fun. Your mind is gonna be blown away. And the more important thing is follow all the instructions because the end result is gonna be amazing.
Thank you. Thank you
So
so much. And thank you for the opportunity. And that like really just to kind of close, like this is for creatives out there, this is possible either to do it solo or to do it with a modestly sized team. I did this in 10 days. Everything that you see on that experience is mine. And that I made it. Every video was edited by me. Every script was edited or written by me or written by AI and punched up by me. Every this, every that. I mean, it's about as me as it gets in terms of like sense of humor, but also skill sets. But what my point here is that you can accomplish this quickly and affordably. This only costs me $750 to make. And if you look at the website and you go through the site, I don't know, Blas, that's probably a 30 grand,
easily.
market easily. 30 grand, that you would bill someone for, right? And it did it for $750 in 10 days, bananas. And so like, if you have but you'll also notice that I did it for me to mitigate risk because I wouldn't present a B2B customer with that opportunity right off the bat. But I wanted to make sure that I was mitigating my own risk by being the sole investor of both time and money in it, and leaned into my storytelling strengths. And anybody out there can do the same and create something of similar, or I'm sure even much better quality.
Yep, that's absolutely true. Well, thank you very much, Chris, for joining this first episode of Still Humans, and talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.